Welcome, everyone. This is Erik Roth, shamanic alchemical astrologer, and this is Erik Roth, shamanic alchemical astrologer, and I am here to talk about the upcoming year, 2025. So we're going to dive into a lot today, but it's going to be over just the major things that are taking place in 2025, astrologically speaking. So won't go through all the different alignments. I know some astrologers go into that, but as I kind of reconstitute this YouTube channel, I'm going to be breaking down certain parts of each of the years that I go into in the future, including various alignments and aspects that are happening in 2025 and beyond. So we'll look at that and kind of give a rundown. At least in this video, we'll give a rundown of everything else. So stay tuned for more. I've had a lot of travels that have taken me away from doing more videos and other business work that I've had to do with my own practice as a single owned business that I'm having to manage. Everything is you are your own marketer, accountant, creator, content creator, and astrologer. Oh, yeah, I've got that title too. So lots to discuss. So let's get into that. All right. So astrology of 2025. I feel like this will be for humanity a more pivotal year than 2024. And it's really coming on the heels of really powerfully shifting a year here in 2024. And as of this recording, just less than a day, less than 12 hours actually before the December solstice on December 21st. So this is December 20th, 2024. But 2025 represents a couple of different things. It represents a corner turn of the 20-year Saturn-Jupiter cycle, which began planting the seeds for humanity in 2020. And included in that would be Pluto and Eris's involvement, strong involvement, along with Mars as a supporting cast in the dynamics and how 2020 went and what it seeded for humanity. Now we're here into the 2024-2025 year, and how, particularly when we come up into June with the last of the Saturn-Jupiter squares, that will really, and by then we'll start to kind of understand how this year may go, but there's some other alignments coming in July and afterward that will be, I think, really, really pivotal. First half of this year, though, through including July, is really going to be huge for not just the United States where I live, but for the entire world. And there's some really powerful months throughout the year. The February to April period being like sort of that first big wave for humanity that 2025 represents here. So let's look over some major things that we're going to really talk about here. Going to do, of course, I'm kind of going over the overview of 2025 plus another little slide about that. We're going to just briefly talk about the new Mars and Venus cycles, though those deserve their own videos. I'll be making a single video just on about Mars and the new cycle that's coming in January. Eclipse seasons, which will have, of course, their own videos. Mercury retrogrades, sometimes I do one for that. The lunar nodes also coming in January, so that is big. They're ingressing in backwards into the signs of Pisces and Virgo, the north node into Pisces, and the south node into Virgo. Uranus moves into Gemini for the first time since World War II period, and Jupiter will continue through Gemini until June 9th and move into Cancer after that. And then, of course, the Saturn-Neptune thing. There's also a Chiron-Eris conjunction period that's coming up in 2025 and 2026. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So a lot of major activity. I feel like this one has more definitely than 2024. And it just feels like much more monumental for humanity, in large part due to various outer planets all moving into new signs. So an example of that is, which began in November of 2024, Pluto finally moving into Aquarius for the long haul. Before, they were just like little entries in 2023 and 2024. And now we're doing the long hauls. That happened November 19th, 2024. And it'll go on until the 2043, 2044 period. We also have Uranus moving into Gemini, Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries. Of course, Jupiter every year moves into a new sign, so it'll be moving into Cancer. And then it's early 20 or mid 2026. I think we've got Chiron moving into Taurus. So it's not often that this happens. In fact, I did a post about this on my social media, about the number of all the outer planets moving into new signs from Pluto all the way through all the way down to Jupiter within a certain date range, number of months. And it doesn't happen all that often. And this is sort of a rare time. I think the closest one that happened was in the McCarthy era, at the height of the McCarthyism in the US, as an example of the shifting of tides and how that kind of fell on its butt at its height, that it reached its maximum point. It couldn't go anywhere else. And there's kind of certainly an analogy to what was going on back then and what's going on today. All right, so let's take a look at some of these other things. So this is just a brief thing for the Venus and Mars cycles. I don't have a special slide for this, but in shamanic alchemical astrology, we look at the synodic cycles of these planets, and starting with their either for the Mars, it's a Mars-Sun opposition, which will happen January 15th/16th, depending on where you are on the planet. And then the Venus cycle, synodic cycle, begins at the first heliacal rise of Venus. What does that mean? The first appearance, visual experiential appearance in the early morning sky before sunrise, which is roughly about 10 degrees from the sun. And you can see that in the east. And that's on March 29th. And that will go on. That's a 19-month cycle. It goes on until October 30th of 2026. So it's the first time since 1870 that Venus will do this in the sign of Pisces. Venus will be retrograde for 6 weeks in 2025, from March 1st until April 12th. And then Mars will continue to be retrograde through the first 2 months of 2025 until February 23rd, 2025. So those play important roles. I don't want to put too much into this. Like I said, there's just so much happening that I could do a 4-hour video, maybe kind of in the even longer, maybe in the line of what one of my favorite astrologers, Chris Brennan, does in his deep analysis of the planets and the alignments each and every month, sometimes having guests. Okay, then Uranus and Gemini, first time since the period of 1941 through 49. Eclipse seasons, it'll happen in March and in September of 2025. Chiron and Eris have a couple of conjunctions, one in March and one in October. And then the Saturn-Neptune conjunction period. This will be the first time that they have been conjunct in any sign since 1989. It happens every 35 and a half years. Saturn will be in Aries for the first time since 96 through 99, 1996 and 99. And then Neptune in Aries for the first time since 1861 through 1875. And that was during the American Civil War and the Reconstructive period. And then the Saturn in Aries period, that was like the like the really like where the internet really super had a big takeoff time across the world in that mid to late 90s period, among other things that we can talk about. That'll be a whole nother video to go into. And of course, in January of 2020, 2025, the lunar nodes, naturally they move backwards, but they move into the signs of Pisces and Virgo for the first time since 06 to 07. And then Jupiter in Cancer for the first time since 2013 to 2014. So we spend about really when it goes into Leo in 2026, it'll be almost exactly half the year where it spends in Cancer, and then the rest of 2026 in Leo. But in 2025, it spends 5 months and 9 days in the sign of Gemini, and then moves into Cancer on June 9th, 2025. All right, so let's go through this. Lunar nodes ingress into signs of Pisces and Virgo. Excuse me, January 11th, 2025 until July 26th, 2026. So the nodes themselves are, they represent future / destiny, and I say that kind of loosely. They both nodes have a strong like karmic energy around them. So the North Ascending node kind of is symbolic of that future destiny, and is not deterministic, but it really represents sort of that range of things. And the lunar node, the North node, which is the one that's moving into Pisces, that's going to be through in 2025 conjuncting Neptune first, and then later in the year moving into I believe it's the springtime, moving to a conjunction with Saturn as well. And the South node represents the descending node, or the sort of the ancestry, where we once were, our past. Relates to each individual on the planet, where the nodes were at the time of their birth, of our personal origin, but of humanity's origin on a more collective level there. So North Node in Pisces helps to co-create conditions for future advancement in interconnectedness spiritually through dreams, physical and technological manifestations, nonlinear realities, so virtual reality, as well as checking in with our feelings and compassion and empathy. I think that there is a new alignment within our own evolution that, as we end the Neptune and Pisces period with the North Node checking in around this time too, I think that is going to be really, really vital, particularly when we get into February and March period, as Neptune and the North Node come into conjunction, and what that represents. There's a really powerful alignment that happens at the end in the eclipse season, at the end second half of March. So we'll take a look at that. And then the South Node, this is in Virgo, it's a chance to let go of outmoded toxic patterns in our collective and individual lives. And it can also help us recognize the sacred within, and purging out when no longer so supportive of our sovereign selves. So as the North is trying to connect into a new future, and in Pisces really with the oneness of all, and the Virgo South Node trying to let go and detoxify any toxic patterns that are not sacred, that are not in alignment with not just us individually, but collectively in humanity, or at least that's the intent. And there's a lot of people, of course, on this planet that will move from a place of fear or egoic desire, and just simply or asleep, not really knowing or having awareness of what's really going on with them. That this is not all that we are, that there is something much, much greater. And so these nodes will, at least I see them helping us in some manner or not. All right. Then also in 2025, we have Chiron and Eris. This plays a role as one of the major themes, and I'm going to talk about at the end of this video there'll be sort of a summation in the sort of the translation of all of this into just several bullet points. So if some of this technical jargon of astrobabble that you're not understanding, it's okay. We'll get to the end and we'll look at that. But I am still going to translate this as much as I can as I go through this video. So Chiron represents where our fracture or wounds are. It has a variety of like what those can be. And I've done a whole video about Chiron and Aries, so you can check that out in my YouTube channel. You can just do a search for that, Erik Roth, Chiron Aries, and it should come up. Now, Chiron and Eris are going to conjunct, and Chiron has been slowly making its way to Eris. It came within a couple of degrees in 2024, but didn't quite get there, and so this is where it is. And then what I feel about this is what this means is part of the energy, particularly when we get to the spring and through the fall of 2025, meaning like say May through October. As you can see, the two conjunctions start in May 26th and October 8th in the 25-degree range there. This is, in fact, I was just talking with a client about Eris and Aries, and there's a lot there that has to do with social activism, and speaking our truths, fighting for what's right, real world truths, not superficial or conspiracy theories or the things that hold water. I mean, obviously, there's some conspiracies that are real, that have been proven real over the time, and there could be still some of those that we discover later. But I'm talking about like something that we're not ignoring our own core truth about what we are and who we are. And if we're ignoring that, just simply projecting out it's this person's fault or it's society's fault and so forth and so on, obviously those can be mitigating factors there that can be influencing that. But there's also like, hey, what's going on within us? What can we do with what we have now? And I think this Chiron Eris is allowing us a chance to actually break away those chains, break free from the manacles that we've placed there, from the those kinds of things that don't support us anymore. This is a chance to speak that truth, in whatever situation that we may be in, and honor it without necessarily, doing great harm to others. That's definitely not what I'm talking about. It's more about not doing harm to ourselves as well, but also, really standing up and speaking for what we got, and actually speaking also through action and instinct of things that we can really trust and move into that space. So equal rights, fighting for those that even can't fight for themselves at times. But it can also at the same time create a little more of a reactionary energy in 2025, where it could be a little more volatile as people kind of ignore and or try to, coming from a place of pain and fear, to try to wage war and other kinds of violence because they're ignoring what they're being run by, I should say, by the wounds without a conscious awareness of that. Okay, so some of the outer planets, I talked about this: Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus. I mentioned that Pluto is changing signs, changed signs back in November 2024. So these are the other four here. And then in 2026, Chiron will start to transition into the sign of Taurus from Aries. So that's like a lot of shifting going on. Whenever an outer planet shifts, it leaves a mark, and particularly in it's getting into those last degree of the sign that it was leaving and into the 0-degree range. That's also super, super powerful, astrologically speaking. We saw that where Pluto was in Capricorn at the 29th degree range in the US general election time, where Donald Trump got reelected for his second term. And so there's, like opening up that, like reaching in, opening up that polarity and going, hey, wait a minute, we still haven't worked through what we need to work through with, you know, the world, or our here in the US, our country and its politics and the structure of society. Like, what else do we need to do? So we can't just try to outshout things or outrun things, but to actually do the deeper work, uncover the shadow of the systems and structures that are in place that no longer serve us. So it's an opportunity. Pluto's given us an opportunity to go into that shadow. And I know that Donald Trump kind of brings out that volatility and all the trash and the shadow of society. And so this is a chance to kind of look at that and have you know, a deeper dive into that space. And even within ourselves, you know, certainly there's going to be some very challenging times. I mean, certainly with, you know, his authoritarian bent, there is definitely some challenge for the populace of the world as well as the US. So it's a challenge for us to kind of look at that and go, what is our system here? What are we doing? Are we just following the leader? Are we just following along, or just projecting all of our you know, our hopes and dreams into one person, or all of our fear into one person? We got to look at that and go, what about ourselves? What are we doing there? So that's also going to help us move forward in our lives and do the deeper work at the ground level. And then that's when it can start to change from the bottom up there. All right, well, let's take a look. I'm going to do by probably the springtime, maybe early spring to mid-spring, I'll do just a formal video about Saturn and Neptune. But this 2025 to 2026 period is very, very remarkable, and only happens once every 35 and a half years. Like the last time this happened was 1989. And so you know, during that time, we had the Cold War begin to end. The Berlin Wall was falling. The Eastern Europe was starting to become more democratized, and we're rising up against the ashes of the waning state of the Soviet Union. There was also what happened in Tiananmen Square in China, and the disaster and the massacre that was the Tiananmen Square event. And so that had an opportunity. Maybe there's a parallel universe where instead of the students being crushed by the army, that there was actually a transformation of that country. So I think the intent was there to transform it through that student movement and from a variety of different you know, idealisms that were coming through. And now that we're into Pluto and Aquarius, rather than Pluto was in that Scorpio range at that time, and at its fastest point, closest point to the sun and the earth during that time, you know, a lot of underworld energy was very, very strongly happening. But this is a chance to our ideals to come forward in an entirely new way. So I kind of recognize that. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to do a updated video about Pluto and Aquarius as well. So no planetary alignment takes place in a void. They're all happening in combination with each other in some way, overlapping waves and patterns, cycles within cycles. And so this is another one, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction period that's starting. We got a little bit of maybe a distant glimpse back in 2024 of between May 29 and July 28 of 2024, when they got within 11 degrees of each other. So Richard Tarnas, an astrologer, in his book Cosmos and Psyche, he uses the wider orbs of 15 degrees for hard aspects with the outer planets. And due to his research, you know, 2024 would mark the start of the conjunction period. Although for the purposes of this video, I'm going to use primarily 2025 and 2026. So humanity experienced some early indications of this conjunction back in 2024 through the illusion of polarization that takes us away from our core center, our core truth, if you will. And this can express in a loss of faith and disillusionment on one side, but as well as a deeper awakening of hope on the other side, at times in conflict with the same person. So within ourselves, but seen greatly out there, particularly here in the US where we're so polarized. And politics hasn't been quite this extreme for a lot of years. But if you go back in US history, there has been some very strong extreme polarizations in politics. So this is not necessarily anything quote new. It's just in the context and the sort of that climactic period where the moments that we rise up into a whole new chapter, that's where we come into kind of a new space, particularly in the context of the situation around the world. So how often do these Saturn-Neptune conjunctions take place? As I mentioned, every 35.5 years. Now, the last time it took place was in 1989. It was in Capricorn, the sign of Capricorn. This time it takes place in the sign of Aries. And the last time that these two planets got together in the sign of Aries was 1703. And that was a time when it was at the height of the slavery trade. It was also the colonial powers were again at a major war. There was a crisis in Spain over the kingdom because there was no heirs to the throne. But what on the flip side, though, this is really interesting about Saturn and Neptune, is that there's also this stronger spiritual kind of ecstatic state that can come from it, that can manifest into reality. And so it was also the origins of the beginnings of what is known as Mardi Gras took place in the southeast of what we now call America here. And so they have this 320, Saturn and Neptune have this 320-year track from one sign to another, and then it will eventually precess into, precess or go into a new sign. There's a whole data plot that I'm going to filter down and bring into this when I do the Saturn-Neptune video, which is a really fascinating thing, which has to do with the modalities of the signs, the cardinal signs, the mutable signs, the fixed signs. It has this pattern with Saturn and Neptune that's really, I think, pretty remarkable. And there's always 9 different tracks that are playing at any one time of Saturn and Neptune together. So that's all in the context of what I shared about earlier, where we're at the beginning of this video, this square of Saturn and Jupiter that was seeded back in 2020. So Saturn-Neptune is going to be playing a very powerful role in how this evolution of the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction started through all the way to 2040 when the next Saturn-Jupiter thing takes place. So that's, again, cycles within cycles. All right. So just kind of give some additional data here. Some last, you can freeze it on this screen if you want to. And this upcoming Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which I won't go over all of this, but it follows the pattern that goes back to 1989 as far as like the near terms like pattern. And there were 3 such conjunctions in 1989 in the sign of Capricorn. They had a waxing square in 1998 into 1999 in the signs of Taurus and Aquarius, as well as the 29th degree of Aries and Capricorn. And then they had an opposition. So as we trying to go through this 35.5 years was in 2006 and 2007. And then in 2015 and 2016, which was interestingly enough, was of course just after that was Trump's first term, when we have the waning Saturn-Neptune square. So looks like that this could be sort of the culmination of this. of this experience, especially if we broaden the Saturn-Neptune conjunction period to 2024, we can kind of get a clearer picture of that, and how society's gone polarized, and when it comes to information and disinformation and truth, and what is real, what is not real. I think that's certainly a something that Neptune and Saturn really show us. They show us both sides of that, and the alchemy that can happen when we get into that spirit into matter thing. Then a new kind of reality can come in that is intended to be more opening and heart opening and practical at the same time for humanity. Where I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the next couple of slides, but so we kind of come into as this 2025 to 2026 period in Aries. This is where, like, Aries is a very strong-willed energy, archetypal force, and it's not to be messed with. And so here we're in the waning Saturn-Neptune square, which happened in Sagittarius and Pisces. We're moving into Aries, and so there's much more, I would say, much more clarity with this, kind of like the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn, that there was a clear indication of paradigms falling apart and new paradigms emerging, and going all the way back to 89. So this one, there's something new coming through, some degree of clarity. In 2025, they have about a quarter to a fifth of degree in the sign of Aries. So Saturn is at 156 Aries and Neptune's at 209 on July 12th, 2025. And then they don't actually conjunct until February 20th of 2026. So the period is the early, like, initial clues started to come in between May and July of 2024. And now we're getting into, when we get to 2025, especially May, June period, you'll start to really, that'll start to build up much more strongly. Okay, so what else to talk about? So this is part of that polarity I mentioned with Saturn Neptune. If we want to boil it down to some, besides spirit into matter, you can also see the separation, the polarization of loss of faith and disillusionment relative to the reawakening of hope and the discovery of spiritual resources and inner faith. And we could choose too, because they belong kind of to the same thing. So when we lose faith and we get disillusioned, it also opens up our hearts and our minds to other potentialities. So confusion is the seed of wonder. It's the seed of knowledge. And it can also move into that space where it reawakens hope and sort of another discovery of our own spiritual resources, both on a personal level and hopefully on a collective level, and reconstitute our own faith, not necessarily from a religious perspective, though it can do that. It's more from a deeply more personal spiritual perspective. And again, it has nothing to do with necessarily believing in something like a particular religious deity, but something within ourselves that is connected to, on a quantum level, to all that is around us. So that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, I do feel, is definitely going to be bringing a lot of that energy in. All right, so I wanted to talk about the period between June 9th and August 23rd. That is when Saturn and Neptune are within 1 degree, and the July 12th being that sort of that moment where they're relatively close together there in 2025. And then they're within 1 degree again between February 7th and March 4th of 2026 at 0045 Aries. So I talked a lot about this, but I'll go ahead and read some of this. So we can think of Saturn shamanically as a middle world planet, as about growth through limits and boundaries. structures and systems and doing the work as necessary, and of kind of like the heaviness of life, gravity, getting things accomplished, and all the things we got to do into the complexities of the middle world. Saturn tends to be a strong part of that. Then you've got Neptune, which is a planet where none of that matters. It's all about the heart's opening to the celestial realm, and like the deeper connections with the oneness of all. And who are we as spirits, as souls, incarnate in this physical reality. And it could be a clash. So there could be certainly a conflict between Saturn and Neptune in this way sometimes. It's between the lawgiver reality of Saturn alchemizing with the planet of hearts, spirit, and illusion of Neptune. So one of the ways it can manifest is through the judgment and structural systemic building of the spiritual heart-centered expression of Neptune, which can happen, like, for example, I got the continuing assessment and making of legal systems and laws around the use of like drugs in this country, hallucinogens, different kinds of things that were originally either banned or that there were super heavy restrictions for. So there's that energy is still like ongoing, and we're still going to be contending with a lot of that, I feel, due to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction period, but also just Saturn's engagement in the sign of Pisces. That is almost, it's very similar to Saturn and Neptune together. Other ways this can exemplify the contrast is between religious doctrine and secularism, a way of life in the personal realm, but also in governmental systems like economic, social, health, and educational systems. So you're seeing, transformations of government and their expression, and how rules and laws and how people are deciding, should we, people are trying to get into whether it's going to be, continue to honor the secular version here in the US, for example, or, really lean into sort of that spiritual religious context. And I think we're going to have a lot of decisions around that, and kind of a breaking apart of things as the clash continues to happen. Another potential expression of this conjunction is to have more resources of escapism of reality, which can also be the drugs as well, but it could also be, fantasy land of all kinds, particularly in the all the entertainment and video games and books and everything out there that are fiction, and kind of living in sort of the fantasy realm. That's where, when Saturn and Neptune come together, it's gonna we're gonna have a lot more resources and available for us to get into that space, but superficial stuff, but also resources to maybe create some kind of reality that isn't just only the fantasy, but actually does something useful and practical that serves spirit, that serves humanity, that serves the earth as well. All right, just to review, I do have a whole video about Saturn and Jupiter square, but just to comment on this, on December 24th, 2024, we have our second one, Saturn in Pisces, and Jupiter in Gemini at 1401, 14 degrees in 1 minute. And then the third one, which is definitely going to play a major role in the transmission of Saturn and Jupiter. No, sorry, not just Saturn and Jupiter, but Neptune, Saturn conjunction on June 15th, 2025. Saturn will be in Aries, and Jupiter will be in Cancer at 1 degree, 18 minutes. And this will help us understand what we're going to have to contend with when we get to the 2029 to 2031 period, when Saturn and Jupiter have 6 oppositions, first in Taurus and Scorpio, then again in Gemini and Sagittarius. So we've got some like major steps that we still have to complete to get through all of this. And the June period is going to be sort of that like next wave. The first wave is coming before June through April, And then May is sort of like this in-between realm a little bit there. And then we get to that June, July, and August period there. All right. So what else to talk about that is borrowed from my previous video? Well, the themes around these squares, similar to what I was sharing before, illusions of idealisms, as well as new technologies that may be highlighted around like technologies that might be just illusion, and idealisms that might just be an illusion as well. Confusion and polarization of the structure and systems we surround ourselves with, for sure. Greater tension, stresses around what we believe and our current reality. More expansion of entertainment creative processes, as I was sharing. And then, of course, continued attempts to regulate and enact laws around drugs, either by removing restrictions and or working with them constructively. So I know where I live here in the state of Oregon, we've gone back and forth around the whole issue of like doing away with criminalization of many drugs. I don't think all drugs, but I think many of the drugs. I'm talking about not just prescription, obviously prescription drugs, but I mean like the stuff that that are hallucinogens that get us high or whatever it might be. That's the thing that marijuana, psilocybin, ketamine, all these things we're still going to be going through the next several months, if not the next year, year and a half here, especially if you include Saturn and Neptune in this, of things that we need to continue to work on around that. Okay, so another thing that's happening in June, and this is the square of Saturn and Jupiter. If you look at where Neptune is here, it's less than a degree away. So I absolutely feel there's that Neptune's going to be playing a powerful role in June. And and since this square comes right in the smack dab in the middle of that month, it's going to be a really powerful time for us, I think, for humanity. Then again, there'll be another video just specifically about Uranus and Gemini, particularly with its connotation that the previous times we've had Uranus and Gemini, the US has been in a major war. World War II, the US, quote, Civil War. And of course, we started and were born from the Revolutionary War with the British back in the late 1700s. So Uranus, the general focus of Uranus and Gemini is on the mind, communication, imagination. This may have some surprises and breakthroughs awaiting us in communication technologies, including how we connect on the internet. I do feel like, when we think of the internet, that this Pluto Aquarius and the Uranus Gemini aspect are going to trine each other as well in the late summer into the early fall of 2025. So there's something about that where they're gonna also do it again in 2026 as well, I believe it is. Yes. So something to kind of connect into and have that awareness that the trines are energies that have a really good flow of energy together, but they could also help not necessarily move mountains, but they can maybe give us a little bit of clarity as as they're done without a little bit of tension there, but there's like the unique mind, if you will, wants to come forth, a very progressive alignment between that. So Uranus is in Gemini between July 7th and November 7th of 2025. So about it's a 4-month period. And then it goes back into Gemini on April 25th, 2026, and will stay there all the way through August 3rd of 2032. And then for about looks like a 5-month period, it'll be back in Gemini, December 11th, 2032 to May 22nd, 2033. And so something to connect with. That's part of why the summer or winter down in the southern hemisphere, but summer here in the north is going to be, I think, really, really unpredictable and a little bit on the wild side. But also, I think there's going to be some grace in there. I think there's going to be some really interesting things that might help inspire us and help us break through to new territories. All right, so there's I talked about in this will be talked about more in a future video that I do with Uranus and in Gemini. There's a great book by Nick Dagan Best, Uranus USA, and it talks about the Uranus returns. It's a relatively brief book because it really hits the major points, but he talks about various people that are in the various time periods, in American history and what was going on there, and he kind of connects a lot of the dots there. I follow some of his work as well. Nick Dagan Best, DAGANBEST is Best is the last name. He does work with Chris Brennan sometimes too. So this will be coming up onto our third Uranus return. It doesn't officially start for a couple more years, 2027, but we might get some early indications of it as early as 2025. It doesn't guarantee that we're going to war. I want to make that clear. It doesn't say, oh, well, that's automatic. So it's like taxes and death. It automatically happens. But no, not necessarily. So in this case, you just something to have an awareness of that. We could choose a different direction there. We could choose a different way of how we respond to things and how we sort out our problems. That it doesn't have to be at the end of a barrel of a gun, but it can be done through dialogue. It can be done through more peaceful means. So that's a challenge to us, but it also is a potentiality. But there's also, of course, there is the potential we could go to another great war that could happen in the years to come. So I'm not saying that I'm not predicting here. I'm just saying that we have some opportunities to work with here. All right, so here's the eclipses. March and September are the 2 months. There's 4 eclipses, 2 total lunar eclipses, and 2 partial solar eclipses. The March 29th eclipse, I think, is going to be well, actually, both eclipses are really profound. But the one on March 29th, which I'm going to show a chart of, is like really remarkable. That takes place at 9 degrees Aries. It also happens to be that very close to where Mercury stations retrograde, about 9.5 Aries, and where near where Venus stations retrograde on March 1st at 10 degrees 50 minutes Aries. So that point gets hit quite a few times. And while that's going on, again, this is March 29th, we have this alignment here. All of these got five points in planets, sun, including sun and moon in Aries, and 5 in Pisces. And most of it is from 24 degrees Pisces to 9 degrees Aries. That's only 13 degrees with that's what, seven points in there. And it's all like the North Node is a strong part of this as well. This is also the day that Venus becomes first visible in the early morning sky. And then Mercury follows, I believe the next day becomes visible on the 10th of March. I'm sorry, the 30th of March, it becomes visible in Pisces as well. So this is like that whole, we can even say the whole week, that last week of March into early April, that's like a very volatile and powerful week. And it would be like a perfect time period to do like powerful, peaceful meditations. You could just work with that energy and bring it in and work with it in a way that helps people, maybe be of service in the world, and speak your truth, doing things like social justice work and volunteering for those that have trouble feeding themselves or have trouble in other parts of their lives. This could be that kind of alignment where we can repurpose that energy, instead of like where you look at this and it can also be highly reactive, where people are reacting through violent means, like what's happening in various wars across the planet. So human beings, if we really honestly got down to it, all human beings, and this, I know some people can tend differently, have different opinions, and I respect that. But we all have the power if we wanted to not enact violence, not shoot people, not like, attack another nation, for example, or, uh, you know, drop bombs on, defenseless people, for example. This is, we could choose not to follow that. Who's the one issuing the order, so to speak? So I'm not saying or advocating that we shouldn't have like, shouldn't defend ourselves or things like that, but there is like a power within us all that we can choose and do something completely different, because we know that none of the stuff, it just keeps repeating over and over again, like what's happening in Israel and in Gaza and in Syria and in Lebanon and other countries like that, where it's just like over centuries and millennia that there is just a repetition of this cycle of violence. And like, where has it really gotten us? There's no, except a lot of pain and suffering, really. And maybe for a few of the billionaires out there, they made a lot of money off of it. But there's not really any benefit to that. So that's something to think about as we go into this time period. And because we can move mountains with our voice, our mind, our actions that are done in different ways, rather than out there, gathering arms and planning a militia or anything like that to overthrow something. It's like, how else can we change that? Um, but there's, I'm again, I'm not against any, people defending themselves and speaking up their truth, speaking for their truth. It's just that, there's too much pain and suffering out there. That's all. All right. So let's look at the Mercury retrogrades. There's 3 of them in 2025, March 14th through April 7th. That's the whole thing I talked about, how that late March alignment there, really super powerful into April. And then we have in July into August, 15 degrees Leo to 4 degrees Leo. And that is something. So for those that have like some of their planets, personal points in some of these signs here, definitely something to watch out for. Mercury retrograde is not a thing that is just out there just to cause problems, but Mercury represents the mind. It's symbolic of the mind, communication, cognition, and thinking. And when it goes retrograde, it's more of an introspection. It's more of a creative level of that thinking. And so since we rely so heavily on communication technology, things can get, there can be a lot more blips and things to go awry. But as you see with all the different planetary things that are happening that are pretty intense for 2025, when things go wrong, or you might blame Mercury retrograde for something, and just keep in mind that there's other things happening too. I mean, Mercury retrograde may be part of it, but it's not the only thing. And so I like to honor Mercury and Mercury retrograde, because I feel like it plays a powerful role in the everyday dialogue that we have here on this planet, not just because it's a popular term, but it tells us something deeper about ourselves. And like, how can we be more diligent? And maybe if we need to send a communication out, either by, social media or text or talking to somebody, it's kind of stopping and thinking, doing maybe some creative thinking about, am I getting that message across in a way that's understandable to the other person? Even if we speak the same language, it may not be. So it may make sense to us, but there may be some things missing from their perspective. So something to also in our own self have that awareness of. And then in November, the last Mercury retrograde, November 9th through November 29th, it goes from 6 Sagittarius to 20 Scorpio. And so again, if you've got anything in that range, I know I have my sun Neptune conjunction in that range. So that'll be like, for example, I'll be looking at that and going, okay, I've got to pay attention. I got to connect into things and, make sure that my communications with others are understandable as maybe I'm giving a reading or at a particular local fair or talking to a group of people doing a teaching. This could be a thing to look at. And so the rundown everything for 2025, any kind of year, it's not about making predictions here, but showing the qualities of 2025. So I do feel like there is hope. I do feel like there is a potential for that, but it's in how we react to things and the events of our lives on a personal level and empower ourselves, but also on a global level. What are we doing there? So some of the things, breaking down of illusions. So things that are kind of illusory right now, that are not real, that you can't like that make no sense, that are completely irrational. I think whatever is an illusion that's meant to kind of like dissolve away will kind of show the core of what it is, even if there is very little there. When dreams meet pragmatism, I feel like that's a big thing around that, where we're trying to, it's kind of like a spirit in a matter, trying to take something ethereal in the astral level and bringing it down here into some kind of material level. It's an underworld of ideologies. Again, the Pluto and Aquarius factor. I recommend you watch the Pluto and Aquarius video that I have, and there'll be a part 2 to that in 2025, where I'm going to go into some, bring up the same issues I brought up before, but go in a little bit deeper and bring up even other learnings that I've had around Pluto and Aquarius. Manifestations of interconnectedness from the celestial realm to here in the reality realm or the middle world. Is the war on the horizon for the US? There's that possibility. Do I think it's likely? Not necessarily, but I think that there is a possibility of it, and there's a lot of variables that still have to kind of fall into place. But I was just watching an historian talk about, the beginnings of what happened, the decades up to major decisions and things that happened in leading up to the US Civil War, and how, there were some violent acts during that time that led up to that. But there were also like signs in there that not many people were paying attention to, and including decisions by the US Supreme Court. So that kind of caught my attention a little bit too. So just something to be aware of. I don't think it'll be anything like what happened in the 1860s, but I think that if there is anything, it'll be done from more of a on a political, economic level, more than a social level, more than necessarily like, okay, two standing armies coming at each other like that. And then the next generation of tech revolution is nearing. I definitely think that, especially around Pluto and Aquarius and the technology around energy generation, but also the nodes moving into Pisces and Virgo, and Uranus into Gemini. I definitely think that there's something to be said about, a different kind of like technology that we haven't seen yet that wants to come through. It's a potential to be both volatile and hopeful. And I feel like it's also the precursor to the dawning of a new era. That new era hasn't quite come in, but it's on its way, if you will. And when you're in the thick of the transition time, it's hard to even see when that will really come in. And sometimes not even aware that we are in a transition. I will share one final thought about 2025 is that there are some researchers that talk about 2025 being the end of the Kali Yuga, or the Dark Age, which is from the ancient Hindu calendar, the Vedic people. That is, I would have to have like some agreement with that, maybe not in totality. I feel that there's other things also play a role in how we're transitioning from one age to a new age, but that could be one of the signs, one of several signs. And from 2025 being the end of the Kali Yuga or the Dark Age, we're moving into we're going to move into 300 years of transition. So we still have a long way to go. That it's not going to happen overnight. I remember at the end of 2020, and I was giving readings to people or doing videos, people would ask, is it going to be, are we going to go back to normal in 2021? Is everything going to be fine? Are we just, I'm assuming we're going to, they would assume that we're going to go back to normal, that 2020 is just a year thing. I said, no, too much has happened. It's too powerful of a planetary alignment, and the seeds that were planted there from the COVID-19 virus to the social movements, Black Lives Matter, for example, to the ideological battles and social battles, the economic battles that were taking place, that created too much of energy expended, that it wasn't just going to like simply like disappear and everything will be returning back to normal. No, it set up a new 20, at least at the minimum, a 20-year process. And for like the US, that we had a Pluto return to begin around that time. So it's a chance for us to take the resources and the things that we have going on now and make a decision. What are we going to do with all of this? And to step up into our own lives, depending on what personal transits or initiations astrological initiations we're experiencing, it's a chance for us to step into what we want to step into, what we really, really, truly, and can make a difference in the world, even if it's just within our family or a small community or one-on-one with individuals. Everybody's got their path. You don't know, no one's out, not everyone has to move millions of people. That's why we have such a wide variety of people here on this planet. I think we need this many, and there's a rise of people coming into new ways of helping, healing, bringing in new wisdom, tapping into the old ancient wisdom, bringing it into the new context here, working energetically. I celebrate all of that. I think more and more people want to bring it into the forefront. So I'm excited for the possibilities of all of this showing up in the long term for humanity. All right, so thank you all for being a part of this and watching this whole video here. Again, I'm going to be doing different segments of each of these different parts that I've talked about here in 2025 and beyond. You can go to my website, spiralnexus.com. I do readings for a living. I've been doing them for 14 years, astrocartography, synastry, couples readings, solar returns, 2025, like annual looks at deeper annual look at things, including progressions, eclipses, and retrogrades and things like that. You can also go to mystaralchemy.com, where Caitlin Castell and I continue to do a star series. We've got 3 full programs, online courses there, with the potential to do more in the future. So mystaralchemy.com, and but like and subscribe if you like this, or share with a friend. I'm excited about the possibilities coming up for 2025, and excited about like what this could really bring to the world. So it's going to be really, really fascinating to see all of that. But at the same time, be safe out there, everyone. I wish all of you happy holidays and a upcoming new year in 2025. And I feel like we are at the control of our own steering wheel if we choose to be. And some of us may need some help in that regard. So all the more the merrier. Let's do it. All right, everyone. Be well, and I'll see you again.